Gold Thread Studios. The Most Feared Man in Busan. Season 1, Episode 2. A City of 8 Million Strangers. Part 1. Gentle piano. A distant subway train. Morning rain tapping lightly against a window. Cities have their own ways of saying good morning. Some wake with roosters. Some wake with church bells. Some wake with fishing boats pushing quietly toward the horizon. Busan woke with trains. A soft mechanical rhythm echoed somewhere beneath the streets. Crosswalk signals chirped patiently. Coffee shops unlocked their doors. Delivery scooters slipped between buses with practiced confidence. The city had already been awake for hours. It simply welcomed newcomers without announcing itself. Trisha opened her eyes slowly. For a few moments, she couldn't remember where she was. The ceiling was unfamiliar. The room was smaller than the bedroom she had left behind. The silence sounded different. Then she noticed the window. Beyond it, rows of apartment buildings climbed the hillside. Farther away, a ribbon of blue sea caught the morning light. Korea. It hadn't been a dream. She sat on the edge of the bed. Her suitcase rested against the wall. Still closed. Home. For now. She smiled to herself. I made it. The words sounded different spoken in a room where no one else could hear them. She unpacked slowly. Not because there was much to unpack. Because every item deserved its place. A framed photograph of her mother and grandfather found a home on the small desk. The old compass rested beside it. The silver star pendant remained around her neck. The little pouch of Jamaican seasoning made her laugh. Mama, she whispered. You're serious. A gentle knock came at the door. 3 careful taps. She opened it. The elderly landlady stood in the hallway. She bowed politely, then offered a small paper bag with both hands. Inside, a warm pastry and a tiny carton of banana milk. The older woman spoke softly in Korean. Trisha understood only one word. Welcome. She smiled brightly. Thank you. The landlady smiled back. Some kindnesses require no translation. After breakfast, Trisha unfolded the campus map. It looked much easier indoors than it did outside. Within 10 minutes, she had confidently walked in exactly the wrong direction. She stopped at a corner, turned the map upside down, then sideways. This worked much better in my bedroom. She laughed at herself. Nearby, an elderly man watering flowers chuckled quietly. He couldn't understand her words, but he understood being lost. He pointed gently toward the next street, then toward the distant university buildings. She bowed clumsily. Thank you. He smiled. The city had just offered its first piece of guidance. As she continued walking, everything competed for her attention. A bakery filled with golden loaves. School children in neat uniforms. The scent of roasted chestnuts drifting through cool autumn air. A florist arranging bright chrysanthemums outside her shop. A convenience store no larger than a living room. Each doorway held another little mystery. Busan wasn't asking her to understand it all at once. It was introducing itself. One street. One smile. One morning at a time. At the top of a gentle hill, she stopped to catch her breath. The harbor stretched before her. Ships rested quietly on shimmering water. Beyond them, the horizon disappeared into pale blue sky. Without thinking, she looked up. Only a handful of stars could ever be seen from a city this bright. But the sky was still the same sky. She smiled. Not because she had found home, because she had begun to believe. Home had found a way to travel with her. Every stranger begins with a single step. A wrong turn. A borrowed smile. A kind gesture from someone whose name you'll never know. Great cities are not built only from steel and stone. They are built one act of ordinary kindness at a time. And somewhere within Busan, another morning was beginning. A morning that would eventually bring two very different lives to the same corner. Beneath the same rain, music lingers as the camera rises above Busan Harbor, revealing the city slowly coming to life. End of Episode 2, Part 1. Picking up immediately after Episode 1, we'll keep the pace measured, grounded, and written for an adult audience. Part 2. Soft piano. The distant hum of the harbor. Crosswalk signals echo faintly through the morning air. By the second morning, Busan no longer felt impossible. It simply felt unfamiliar. There was a difference. The first belonged to fear. The second belonged to learning. Trisha preferred learning. She left her apartment just after 8. The autumn air carried a coolness that still surprised her. Back home, October was simply another warm month. Here, the breeze seemed to have traveled down from the mountains before greeting the sea. She pulled her coat a little closer, not because she was cold, because she was still becoming accustomed to seasons that announced themselves. The sidewalks were already busy. Office workers walked with quiet purpose. Students hurried toward lectures. Shop owners swept the entrances to their businesses before unlocking the doors. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they were going. Only Trisha still paused to admire ordinary things. A baker arranging fresh pastries. An elderly woman tending chrysanthemums outside her apartment. A violinist practicing beneath the elevated railway. She found herself smiling. Busan had its own music. You simply had to slow down enough to hear it. Orientation officially began that afternoon. The university auditorium filled with voices from every corner of the world. English, Korean, Japanese, French, Spanish, Arabic. Languages flowed together without competing. Everyone understood the same feeling. Everyone had left somewhere behind. The dean welcomed the new students. He spoke about opportunity, responsibility, curiosity. Then he said something that stayed with Trisha. The purpose of studying abroad is not to become someone else. It is to discover more of who you already are. She wrote this sentence carefully in her notebook. Some words deserve to travel home. After the presentation, students gathered in small groups. Conversations formed naturally. Names, countries, dreams. A young engineer from Brazil. A teacher from Kenya. An architect from Germany. A nurse from the Philippines. Each carried a different story. Each had crossed an ocean for a different reason. Yet all of them understood what it meant to begin again. During lunch, Mina waved enthusiastically from across the cafeteria. Trisha. She carried 2 trays. I guessed you wouldn't know what to order. I appreciate your confidence. I've already accepted that you're going to need help. They laughed. The ease between them surprised Trisha. Friendship, she realized, sometimes arrived quietly. Without asking permission, Mina pushed a steaming bowl across the table. Try this. What is it? Kimchi jjigae. Trisha leaned closer. It smells serious. It is. She tasted the soup. Her eyes widened. There was warmth, depth, a slow-building heat that arrived politely before making itself completely at home. Mina watched nervously. Too spicy. Trisha reached for another spoonful. I think. She smiled. It's introducing itself. Their laughter drifted across the cafeteria. Several nearby students smiled without knowing the joke. Joy often required no translation. That evening, Trisha decided to walk home instead of taking the subway. She wanted to learn the streets. Not from a map. From experience. The city changed as daylight faded. Office towers reflected amber sunsets. Small restaurants filled with conversation. The scent of grilled meat drifted through narrow alleys. Street musicians gathered beneath illuminated storefronts. Busan became softer after dark. More personal. Less hurried. She crossed a pedestrian bridge overlooking the harbor. Ships rested quietly against the evening tide. Far below, ferries came and went with practiced rhythm. She leaned against the railing. For the first time since arriving, she wasn't comparing Busan to Jamaica. She was simply allowing Busan to become Busan. Across the water. Inside a private conference room overlooking the harbor. Another meeting was ending. The room remained silent until one man stood. No one interrupted him. No one questioned him. He buttoned his charcoal coat, collected a slim folder from the polished table, then walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. Beyond the glass, the city stretched beneath him. He watched the ferries crossing the harbor. Calm. Thoughtful. Unhurried. One of the executives finally spoke. The investors are waiting. The man nodded once. They've waited this long. They can wait another minute. His voice never rose. It never needed to. The room listened. Not because he demanded attention. Because he had earned it. The audience never saw his face. Only his reflection against the harbor lights. Back on the bridge. A cool breeze brushed across Trisha's face. She smiled without knowing why. Somewhere within this vast city, thousands of lives continued moving toward tomorrow. She was one of them now. She didn't know that another life had already begun moving quietly toward hers. Not by destiny alone, but by the ordinary decisions people make every single day. Some cities welcome you with monuments. Others, with people. Busan did neither. It offered something quieter. Another morning. Another street. Another chance to belong. And sometimes, that is how the most extraordinary stories begin. Not with thunder. Not with certainty. But with two lives. Walking steadily toward the same horizon, without yet knowing the other's name. Part 3. Gentle piano. Autumn wind. Distant harbor horns. There is a strange kind of loneliness. That doesn't come from being alone. It comes from having no one who remembers the version of you that existed yesterday. 3 weeks passed. Not dramatically. Quietly. One lecture became another. One subway ride became familiar. One coffee shop remembered her order. The cashier no longer hesitated before saying her name. Good morning, Trisha. The pronunciation wasn't perfect. Neither was her Korean. They smiled anyway. Progress rarely announced itself. Busan had begun teaching her its rhythm. Stand to the right on the escalator. Bow when greeting professors. Carry cash for the neighborhood market. Remove your shoes before entering certain homes. Never speak loudly on the subway. Each lesson was small. Together, they slowly transformed a stranger into a resident. Some evenings, homesickness still arrived without warning. Usually after calling home, her mother's voice always sounded warm. Her grandfather always asked the same question. Have you looked up lately? She always smiled. Yes. And? There aren't as many stars. He chuckled softly. There don't have to be. She waited. You only need enough light to remember where hope lives. After each call, she stood by the apartment window for a while. The city shimmered beneath her. Neon signs. Apartment lights. Traffic flowing like rivers of amber. Somewhere beyond all that brightness, she imagined the hills of St. Elizabeth settling into another evening. The distance still hurt, but it no longer frightened her. At the university, Professor Han noticed something about his newest international student. She asked questions, not to impress anyone, to understand. She stayed after lectures, not because she was struggling, because she was curious. One afternoon, he stopped her outside the classroom. Miss Campbell. Yes, Professor. You listen before you speak. She nodded politely. My grandfather always said, if you listen carefully enough, people usually tell you what they need. The professor smiled. Your grandfather sounds like a wise man. He'd probably tell you he's just an old farmer. Sometimes. Professor Han replied, those are the wisest people. That same afternoon, on the opposite side of the city, a meeting came to an abrupt halt. A young executive had made an expensive mistake. He expected shouting. He expected humiliation. Instead, the man at the head of the table simply closed the report. What have you learned? The young executive looked confused. I won't make it again. Good. The report was handed back. Then the mistake has already earned its value. The meeting continued. No raised voices. No threats. Only quiet authority. As the executives filed out, one whispered to another, I'd rather disappoint anyone else. The other nodded. So would I. Fear, they understood, did not always arrive loudly. Sometimes, it wore perfect manners. That Saturday, Mina convinced Trisha to visit the famous fish market. The streets buzzed with life. Fresh seafood glistened on beds of ice. Vendors called cheerfully to passing customers. Tourists stopped every few meters to take photographs. Trisha turned in slow circles, trying to absorb everything at once. It smells like the sea. Mina laughed. I should hope so. It smells like home too. Really? We grew up by the Caribbean. She smiled. The water speaks a different language, but it still sounds like the ocean. They bought hot sweet pancakes from a street vendor. Steam curled into the cool afternoon air. As they ate, a black luxury sedan rolled silently through the narrow street. Traffic parted almost instinctively. Conversation softened. Several business owners offered respectful bows. The car never stopped. Its windows remained dark. Trisha barely noticed. She was too busy laughing because powdered sugar had somehow ended up on her coat. Mina brushed it away. You are impossible. I've only been here 3 weeks. I know. And you're already making memories. Far inside the passing sedan, a folder rested unopened on the seat beside its owner. On the cover was the name of a charitable scholarship foundation. At the bottom of the first page, buried among dozens of reports, appeared the name, Trisha Campbell. The folder remained closed. Not yet. There would be another day for business. Today. The harbor was beautiful. Lives rarely collide all at once. They drift closer. One ordinary day at a time. A familiar café. A shared street. A passing car. A name waiting inside an unopened file. None of it looked important. Yet history has always been patient. It knows that the strongest threads are woven slowly. Lingers as evening settles over Busan harbor, the city glowing beneath a sky where only a handful of stars can still be seen. Part 4. The umbrella. Gentle piano. Soft rain. The distant rhythm of windshield wipers. Rain arrived without warning. The morning had been clear. The afternoon had been bright. By early evening, Gray clouds gathered above the harbor. Within minutes, Busan disappeared behind curtains of rain. Students hurried from the university buildings. Umbrellas bloomed across the campus like flowers opening all at once. Black, navy, transparent, yellow. The sidewalks became rivers of moving color. Trisha stood beneath the library entrance. She looked toward the street, then upward, then back toward the rain. I checked the weather. She smiled to herself. It clearly had other plans. Her backpack contained notebooks, a water bottle, a novel she had borrowed from the library. No umbrella. She considered making a run for the subway. One look at the rain changed her mind. She laughed softly. Not today. Beside her stood an elderly woman balancing 2 heavy shopping bags. She kept glancing toward the crossing light. The rain wasn't the problem. The bags were. Without thinking, Trisha stepped forward. May I help you? The woman hesitated, then smiled. She understood enough English. Thank you. 1 bag in each hand. They crossed the street together. The rain soaked Trisha's coat almost immediately. She didn't seem to notice. The older woman unlocked the gate to a modest apartment building. Before disappearing inside, she bowed deeply, then pressed something into Trisha's hand. A folded handkerchief embroidered with tiny blue flowers. Trisha tried to return it. The woman gently closed Trisha's fingers around it. A gift. For kindness. By the time she reached the next intersection, she was laughing. Her shoes squished with every step. Loose curls escaped from beneath her hood. Rain clung to her eyelashes. If her mother could see her now, she'd probably say, "That child still refuses to carry an umbrella." A black sedan stopped at a red light. Inside, June looked absently through the rain-speckled window. Another long meeting. Another contract. Another decision. The city drifted past in blurred reflections. Then, something caught his attention. A young woman, completely soaked, walking through heavy rain, smiling, not because she enjoyed being wet, because moments earlier she had helped a stranger before helping herself. He had seen the entire exchange from the car. The driver noticed his silence. "Sir?" June didn't answer immediately. Instead, he watched as the young woman paused beneath a streetlight to tuck a small embroidered handkerchief safely into her pocket, as though it were something precious. The traffic light turned green. The cars behind them waited. No one sounded a horn. The driver looked into the rearview mirror. "Sir," June spoke quietly. "Pull over." The sedan eased toward the curb. Rain drummed steadily against the roof. June reached for the umbrella resting beside him. A simple black umbrella. Nothing expensive. Nothing remarkable. He stepped out into the rain. The driver instinctively moved to follow. June raised one hand. "I'll be fine." Trisha heard footsteps behind her. She turned. A tall man stood a few meters away. Dark charcoal overcoat. Rain beating across his shoulders. One hand resting lightly on the umbrella. His expression was calm. Not cold. Simply composed. He extended the umbrella toward her. "I think you'll need this more than I do." His English carried only the faintest trace of an accent. Clear. Measured. Unhurried. Trisha blinked. "Oh, I couldn't." "You can. You'll get soaked." A hint of a smile touched the corner of his mouth. "I have another car waiting." She looked behind him. The black sedan rested quietly at the curb. The driver stared straight ahead, professional enough to pretend he wasn't watching. Trisha accepted the umbrella with both hands. "Thank you." "You've already thanked someone else today." She looked surprised. You saw that? I did. A brief silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable. Just unexpected. She smiled. My grandfather always says kindness should keep moving. June considered that. Your grandfather sounds like a wise man. He'd probably tell you he's just an old farmer. Something softened in June's eyes. Those are often the wisest people. For the first time, their eyes truly met. Neither looked away quickly. Neither searched for clever words. The rain filled the silence between them. Finally, Trisha laughed. I don't even know your name. He looked toward the rain-washed street for a moment. Then back at her. June. Just June. He nodded once. Just June. She smiled warmly. I'm Trisha. I know. The words escaped before he intended them to. A tiny pause. You know? The university. I've seen your name. It wasn't entirely untrue. She accepted the explanation without suspicion. A bus pulled to the curb. Its doors folded open with a soft hiss. Passengers hurried aboard. Trisha looked toward the bus. Then back at June. I should go. He nodded. You should. She stepped onto the first stair. Then turned. I'll give your umbrella back. He smiled. Keep it. I can't. You'll need it. The doors closed. The bus pulled away. Through rain-speckled glass, Trisha watched the stranger grow smaller. He remained standing on the sidewalk, hands in his coat pockets, watching the bus disappear into the evening traffic. The driver approached quietly. Sir. June never looked away from the road. What is it? We're late. I know. He continued watching until the bus disappeared around the corner. Then he spoke almost to himself. She smiled. The driver frowned. Sir? Nothing. He turned toward the waiting sedan. Let's go. First meetings are rarely recognized while they are happening. They look ordinary. A rainy evening. A borrowed umbrella. Two strangers exchanging names. Yet sometimes, years later, we discover that our lives quietly changed. In the space between one heartbeat and the next, neither Trisha Campbell nor the man called June understood it that evening. The rain did. And it remembered. Swells gently as the bus disappears into the rain, while the black sedan merges silently into the evening streets of Busan. Part 5. An ordinary evening that refused to end. Soft piano. Rain fades. The distant hum of buses moving through wet streets. The bus pulled away from the curb with a gentle hiss. Water streamed across the windows, blurring the city into moving watercolor. Trisha found a seat near the middle. The umbrella rested across her lap. Simple. Black. Unremarkable. Yet, she couldn't stop looking at it. She smiled. Then quietly shook her head. Who does that? No one answered. The city continued sliding past the glass. Across Busan. The black sedan moved through evening traffic. June sat in silence. His phone vibrated twice. He ignored it. A third call followed. His driver glanced into the mirror. Sir. I know. June finally answered. I'll be there in 15 minutes. He ended the call without another word. Then looked back toward the rain-covered streets. His driver had worked beside him for nearly 12 years. He had learned something. When June became quieter, he was thinking harder. Tonight, he had hardly spoken at all. The boardroom waited. 8 executives stood as June entered. No one had asked them to. They simply did. The presentation resumed. Charts. Contracts. Profit forecasts. Expansion plans. June listened carefully, asked precise questions, made 3 decisions, corrected 2 assumptions, approved 1 investment. The meeting ended 40 minutes later. One executive quietly whispered to another, "I don't know how he notices everything." The older man replied, "He notices people first." Meanwhile, Trisha climbed the stairs to her apartment. Her shoes were finally beginning to dry. She unlocked the door, placed her backpack on the floor, hung the borrowed umbrella carefully beside it. Not on the umbrella stand, on the coat hook, as though she were afraid it might be forgotten. She called home. Her mother answered before the second ring. "Hello, my love." "Mama, how was your day?" "It rained." Her mother laughed. "So you finally bought an umbrella?" "Not exactly." For the next 10 minutes, Trisha told the story. Getting lost, helping the elderly woman, the embroidered handkerchief, the stranger, the umbrella. She never mentioned that she'd noticed his eyes. She wasn't ready to admit that even to herself. Her mother listened quietly, then smiled. "So, what? There are still good people in the world." "There are. I'm glad one found you." Later that night, her grandfather called. As always, he asked the same question. "Did you look up today?" "I did." "And?" "It rained." He laughed. The sky was still there. "I know." Then she added thoughtfully, "I met someone." There was a brief silence. "What kind of someone?" "I don't know yet." Her grandfather didn't ask whether the stranger was handsome, or young, or wealthy. Instead, he asked the question only he would think to ask. "How did he make you feel?" Trisha leaned back in her chair. She considered the answer carefully. "Safe." The old farmer smiled to himself. That's a good beginning. On the opposite side of the city, June finally returned home. His apartment overlooked Busan harbor. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the lights of ships moving slowly across the water. He loosened his tie, placed his watch on the table. The house was immaculate. Quiet. Almost too quiet. He poured a cup of tea, walked to the window. Rain still shimmered across the streets below. Without thinking, he found himself remembering a sentence. "My grandfather always says kindness should keep moving." He repeated it silently. Once, then again. It had been many years since anyone had reminded him of his own grandfather. He wasn't expecting that. His housekeeper entered quietly. "Sir, your dinner is ready." In a moment, she nodded and withdrew. She had worked in the household for nearly 20 years. She noticed something unusual. When Mr. June was troubled, he stood at the window. When he was planning, he stood at the window. Tonight, he was smiling at the window. Very slightly, but smiling nonetheless. Near midnight, Busan settled into a quieter rhythm. The traffic thinned. The cafes closed one by one. Rainwater still glistened beneath the streetlights. In one apartment, a young woman slept peacefully with a borrowed umbrella hanging near her front door. In another, a man looked out across the harbor wondering why a 5-minute conversation had remained with him all evening. Neither believed their lives had changed. They were wrong. Not because love had arrived, because attention had. And attention is where every great... The world often imagines that love begins with certainty. It rarely does. More often, it begins with remembrance. A face that returns to your thoughts. A sentence that refuses to leave. An umbrella hanging by a door. A quiet smile at the edge of memory. Before affection, before trust, before love, comes something much smaller. The simple realization that someone you met only once has somehow stayed with you. Music lingers as the camera rises above the rain-washed streets of Busan, revealing two windows glowing against the night, separated by miles, yet connected by a single ordinary encounter. Part 6. The Woman with the Umbrella. Low piano. Early morning harbor ambience. A ferry horn echoes across the water. Busan believed in routine. Every morning, millions of people stepped into the city's rhythm. Subway doors opened. Coffee machines hissed. Crosswalk signals chirped. Ferries crossed the harbor with perfect precision. Somewhere, someone was beginning the best day of their life. Somewhere else, someone was saying goodbye. The city treated both moments exactly the same. It simply kept moving. June rarely noticed mornings anymore. He measured time differently. Meetings, negotiations, deadlines, board reports, security briefings. Every hour already belonged to someone else before it belonged to him. His driver eased the black sedan through the streets overlooking the harbor. Rain had washed the city clean during the night. The autumn sky had returned. Sharp. Blue. Bright. His assistant opened the day's schedule. You have the investment committee at 9. The redevelopment council at 11. Lunch with the mayor. The charity foundation at 2. June nodded. Nothing unusual. Until one folder rested quietly beneath the others. International Scholarship Foundation. He opened it. A list of this year's students. Countries. Programs. Academic records. The foundation had supported international students for nearly 15 years. Most recipients never knew where the funding originated. June preferred it that way. Recognition had never interested him. Results had. As he turned another page, his eyes stopped. Campbell Trisha. Nationality. Jamaican. Program. International Business. Academic Excellence Award. Community Leadership Recognition. Volunteer Service. He read the page twice. Not because he remembered the file. Because he remembered the woman. His assistant noticed the pause. Sir? June closed the folder. Nothing. He placed it beside him. Yet he didn't place it at the bottom of the stack. He left it on top. Across the city, Trisha hurried toward her morning lecture. The borrowed umbrella rested comfortably in her hand. She still intended to return it. She simply had no idea how. Just June. She smiled. What kind of introduction is that? Mina caught up with her outside the economics building. Morning. Morning. You look suspiciously cheerful. I do. You've been smiling at that umbrella for 3 days. Trisha laughed. I have not. You absolutely have. I was thinking. About? The man who lent it to me. Mina stopped walking. Oh. It isn't like that. I didn't say it was. You were thinking it. I was absolutely thinking it. They both laughed. Then Mina became curious. So, what was he like? Trisha searched for the right words. He was. She frowned thoughtfully. Quiet. Quiet. But not awkward. Confident. Without showing off. Older. A little. Handsome. Trisha hesitated just long enough. Mina grinned triumphantly. I knew it. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Later that afternoon, June visited the Scholarship Foundation offices. The director greeted him warmly. Always a pleasure. June nodded politely. I wanted to review this year's students. Of course. The director handed him several folders. We've selected an exceptional group. June read each file carefully. Every student represented years of sacrifice. Late nights. Family support. Missed holidays. Quiet determination. He respected that. He had built his own life the same way. He stopped once more at Trisha's application. Attached to the final page, a short personal statement. He read it slowly. Education gives us knowledge. Compassion teaches us how to use it. I hope to return home with both. He closed the file. No dramatic reaction. Just silence. Then one sentence. Approve the additional research grant. The director looked surprised. Without interview? June nodded once. Character interviews itself. Outside. The foundation's receptionist watched him leave. She had worked there for 6 years. She had never once seen him recommend additional funding after reading only a written application. That evening, Trisha walked along the harbor after class. The city lights shimmered across the water. She stopped beneath a row of autumn trees. The umbrella rested beside her. She looked at it, then laughed quietly. I really do need to give this back. She had no idea that its owner had just changed the course of her academic future, without either of them speaking another word. We often imagine that destiny arrives with grand announcements. It rarely does. More often, it hides inside ordinary decisions. A scholarship approved. A sentence remembered. A promise quietly honored. Neither Trisha nor June believed they had entered each other's lives. Yet the thread between them had already begun to tighten. Neither of them had pulled it. Life had. Music swells gently as the camera rises above Busan Harbor, the city glowing beneath a crisp autumn evening. Part 7. An invitation without a name. Warm piano with subtle strings. The sounds of a university campus in late afternoon. 3 days later, an email arrived. It appeared between lecture notes. A reminder about tuition. And an advertisement for discounted train tickets. Its subject line was simple. International Research Foundation. Trisha almost ignored it. She opened the message while walking across campus. Then stopped. Read it once. Then again. Then a third time. She wasn't imagining it. Her scholarship had been expanded. An additional research grant had been approved. It would cover books, research travel, language immersion programs, even part of her housing costs. For a long moment, she simply stood beneath a row of autumn maples. Students walked around her. Leaves drifted gently across the pathway. The world continued moving. She couldn't. Mina found her 10 minutes later. Trisha? No answer. Earth to Jamaica. Trisha looked up slowly. I think. What? I think someone made a mistake. Mina took the phone. Read the email. Looked at Trisha. Then looked at the phone again. No. What? They didn't make a mistake. You sure? They congratulated you 3 times. That evening, Professor Han invited her to his office. The shelves behind him were crowded with books collected over 40 years. Some were worn from use. Others still looked new. He gestured toward a chair. Please. She sat, still unsure why she had been called. I understand you've received the foundation grant. Yes, Professor. You've earned it. She smiled politely. Thank you. He leaned back thoughtfully. Do you know how many students receive that award each year? She shook her head. Very few. Then, he smiled gently. Allow yourself to be proud. She looked down at her hands. I don't always know how. Professor Han nodded. The best students rarely do. Outside, the afternoon sky had turned the color of polished copper. Autumn was settling comfortably across Busan. Across the city, Jun stepped into the headquarters of the Hanseong Foundation. Unlike his corporate office, this building was quiet. Photographs lined the walls. Scholarship recipients, medical outreach teams, community housing projects, school libraries. No portraits of donors. No bronze statues. Only the people whose lives had changed. Just the way he preferred. The foundation director greeted him warmly. The grant has been processed. Jun nodded. Good. The student sent a thank you letter. I assume it was addressed to the foundation. Yes. Then it reached the correct person. The director smiled. You never change. Jun looked at one of the photographs. A graduating class from nearly 10 years earlier. They're thanking opportunity. Not me. He paused before another photograph. A young woman receiving her degree. Behind her stood parents whose faces carried equal measures of pride and disbelief. Jun studied the image for a moment. You can change a family's future, he said quietly, without them ever knowing your name. The director watched him carefully. For someone who dislikes recognition, you've changed many lives. Jun gave the smallest smile. My grandfather used to say, if you plant a tree, don't expect the fruit to know who watered it. The sentence surprised even him. It sounded remarkably similar to something Trisha's grandfather might have said. Different countries. Different generations. The same quiet wisdom. That evening, Trisha stood along the harbor with a notebook balanced on her knees. She wasn't studying. She was writing. Not an assignment. A letter. Dear Mama, Busan still surprises me every day. The mountains remind me that every place has its own way of holding people. The sea isn't the Caribbean. But sometimes, when the wind is right, it almost feels like it's trying to tell me the same stories. She paused, smiled, then continued. Something wonderful happened today. She folded the letter carefully. Tomorrow, she would mail it. Tomorrow, she would mail it. Some news deserved paper. Some joy deserved handwriting. Far across the harbor, Jun stood on the balcony outside his office. The city shimmered beneath him. His phone buzzed. Another meeting. Another decision. Another responsibility. He slipped the phone back into his pocket. For just one more minute, he allowed himself to watch the ferries crossing the water. Somewhere within that city, a young woman from Jamaica believed a scholarship foundation had changed her life. She wasn't entirely wrong. She simply didn't know the whole story. Not every kindness introduces itself. Some arrive quietly. Signed only with hope. A grant approved. A dream made lighter. A burden shared by hands that remain unseen. Trisha believed gratitude required a name. Jun believed generosity did not. Neither understood that the strongest threads are often the invisible ones. They hold without asking to be noticed. Music rises gently as evening settles across Busan Harbor. Two people stand on opposite shores of the same city, connected by a decision neither fully understands. A city of 8 million strangers. Director's Cut. Part 8. The Harbor Festival. Traditional Korean percussion blending gently with piano. the distant laughter of families, seagulls circling above the waterfront. Busan celebrated the sea the way some cities celebrated history. The harbor was more than water. It was memory, livelihood, promise. Every autumn, the waterfront came alive. Lanterns stretched above narrow streets. Food stalls lined the promenade. Traditional dancers shared space with modern musicians. Children chased bubbles drifting on the evening breeze. The city seemed to pause, only long enough to remember why it had first been built beside the ocean. Mina had insisted they go. You can't study in Busan and miss the harbor festival. I still have reading to finish. You'll still have reading tomorrow. I have an assignment. You'll have that tomorrow too. Trisha laughed. I see you've prepared your argument. I've been preparing it all week. By sunset, the promenade glowed with thousands of lanterns. Their reflections shimmered across the harbor. The scent of grilled squid mixed with roasted chestnuts. Families wandered slowly. Couples took photographs beneath illuminated arches. Elderly neighbors shared folding chairs and quiet conversation. No one appeared to be in a hurry. For one evening, the city allowed itself to breathe. Trisha carried a small paper cup of hot cinnamon tea. She stopped every few minutes. Not because she was indecisive. Because there was simply too much to absorb. A calligrapher painting names with effortless precision. A grandmother teaching her granddaughter how to fold colored paper into cranes. A young violinist playing beside the water while strangers quietly gathered to listen. Busan wasn't trying to impress her. It was simply being itself. She appreciated that. Farther along the promenade, a modest stage overlooked the harbor. A charity auction had just concluded. The announcer thanked local businesses, volunteers, and sponsors whose contributions funded scholarships and neighborhood programs. One name received the loudest applause. Yet the man himself never stepped onto the stage. He had already slipped quietly into the crowd. Recognition embarrassed him. Results mattered more. June preferred walking without an escort whenever security allowed it. His security team hated the habit. He insisted on it anyway. A city looked different when people forgot who you were. He stopped beside a small photography exhibition. The display featured portraits of Busan residents, fishermen, teachers, dock workers, nurses, students. One photograph caught his attention. An elderly woman smiling while holding an embroidered handkerchief with tiny blue flowers. The caption explained that she spent her retirement sewing gifts for strangers who had shown unexpected kindness. June smiled faintly. He recognized the handkerchief. You remembered. The voice came from beside him. He turned. Trisha stood there holding the same embroidered handkerchief carefully folded inside her notebook. She hadn't seen him at first. She had been studying the photograph. Then she looked up. Recognition softened her face. June. He inclined his head politely. Miss Campbell. She laughed. We've met twice. I think you can call me Trisha now. I think I can. For a moment, they simply stood before the photograph. Neither felt the need to rush the conversation. I came to thank her. Trisha said quietly. I never found her again. June looked toward the harbor. Some people leave gifts. They don't expect to see the ending. She nodded. My grandfather used to say, you don't plant fruit trees for yourself. You plant them for people you'll never meet. June looked at her. Your grandfather and mine would have had a long conversation. She smiled. I think they'd have become friends. So do I. A burst of applause erupted from the nearby stage. Fireworks were about to begin. The crowd gradually moved toward the waterfront. Without speaking, They found themselves walking in the same direction. Not together. Simply beside one another. The first firework rose above the harbor. A silver bloom unfolded across the night sky. Then another. Blue. Gold. Crimson. The reflections danced upon the water below. Children cheered. Parents pointed upward. Even the ferries paused briefly beyond the harbor entrance. Trisha watched quietly. They're beautiful. June nodded. They disappear quickly. My grandfather would disagree. He looked at her. He always said, the brightest things don't disappear. They stay with the people who witness them. June considered the words carefully. I like your grandfather. So do I. A little girl standing nearby accidentally dropped her paper lantern. The wind carried it toward the water. Without hesitation, Trisha caught it before it reached the harbor. She knelt. Relit the tiny candle with help from the girl's father. The child bowed deeply. Thank you. Trisha bowed back. My pleasure. June watched without interrupting. Kindness. Again. Not performed. Simply lived. His phone vibrated. 3 times. The screen displayed one word. Chairman. Business had returned. He slipped the phone back into his pocket. Not yet. I should go. He said it almost reluctantly. So should I. Trisha smiled. She lifted the umbrella he had given her weeks earlier. I still haven't returned this. I noticed. I haven't forgotten. I know. She looked at him curiously. Why are you smiling? Because. He glanced toward the umbrella. I think it's finally found the right owner. They exchanged a quiet farewell. No promises. No plans. No exchange of phone numbers. Only a shared understanding that this city, vast as it was, had somehow brought them together twice. As Trisha disappeared into the festival crowd, June remained where he was. His security chief approached discreetly. Sir. Everything is ready. June nodded. He watched the lantern lights drifting across the harbor one last time. Then he spoke. Tell the foundation director. The Campbell Research Project has my full support. Yes, sir. The security chief hesitated. Should we inform her? June looked back toward the crowd. No. If she succeeds, I want it to be because she believes she earned it. There are meetings that change the course of a life. Not because dramatic words are spoken, but because quiet truths are shared. 2 grandchildren, carrying the wisdom of 2 old men, from opposite sides of the world. 2 adults, discovering that kindness sounds remarkably similar, no matter what language first taught it. The festival ended. The fireworks faded. The harbor grew quiet once more. But something remained. Not love. Not yet. Respect. And sometimes, respect is the strongest foundation upon which love is ever built. Music rises with piano, strings, and the gentle resonance of traditional Korean instruments as hundreds of lanterns drift across Busan Harbor.